A Place in the Sun, Chapter 6. The Desert. Senwut felt as though stones were tied to his ankles. He dragged his feet along, stumbling over ridges in the sand. He was afraid if he fell, he wouldn't be able to get up again. The heat made it difficult to breathe. The scorch of the desert bore down on him from above and reflected up from below, surrounding him in heat. Senwut pushed through the heat in slow motion, as if he were walking underwater. Water. How long had it been? His throat ached. The man behind Senwut chanted his death song. Senwut plodded along to the man's words. O breaker of bones, I have not lied. O eater of entrails, I have not added to the weight of the balance. O embracer of fire, I have not built a dam against running water. When they had started out across the desert, there had been 50 of them. Senwut was too weak to count, but he guessed they had lost at least 10 so far. The first to drop was an old man. The guards whipped him until they were tired, then left him where he lay. Not long after, Senwut heard the jackals howl. He looked back. In the distance, through the shimmering waves of heat, Senwut saw the swarming mass of wild dogs. He was glad he was too far to see more than a blob of brown fur, but even that much haunted him. That night, Senwut dreamed of jackals snarling and tearing at his flesh. He awoke shivering from the night cold. Since then, others had fallen. He hadn't looked back. Senwut watched a guard drink long from his water pouch. Senwut ran his swollen tongue over his cracked lips. He picked up a pebble to suck on, but it just stuck in his withered mouth. "Make camp," the lead guard hollered back to the guards flanking the line of ragged prisoners. Senwut fell to his knees. He waited for the guards to set out the water rations. Psst! Senwut felt a tap on his sunburned shoulder. He turned. It was the boy, about his own age, he'd noticed on the first day. By the end of that first march, Senwut had stopped noticing anything but his own thirst and hunger. The boy was tattered and dusty, but he didn't look half dead like the rest of them. "Look!" Senwut followed the boy's finger to a line of ants marching down into a hole. "So?" Senwut watched the guards. He had missed his ration of water the first day. He was careful not to let it happen again. When the guard's back was turned, the boy dug in the sand. He pulled his fist from inside the anthill and then held out an open palm to Senwut. Senwut expected to see a handful of sand, but instead the boy's palm overflowed with seed. He poured it into Senwut's hand and pulled out another fistful. Senwut greedily ate the seed, licking his palm to get all of it. The guard waved to Senwut to come get his cup of water. Senwut wobbled to his feet. He had to force himself not to gulp it down. He rolled the water around in his mouth, back and forth across his tongue before swallowing. The water was tepid and tasted of the mud bottom of the Nile, but it was wet and it was gone before his thirst was satisfied. Senwut studied the other prisoners. He hadn't really looked at them since that first day. Their skin was blistered and peeling, hanging from their shrunken bones. The boy looked worn too, but there was something different about him, something unlike the others. His clothes were weather-worn like theirs, and he was sunburned. What was different? His eyes. He watched everyone, everything. The rest sat dully, staring into space right in front of them. Senwut knew he too had sat just like that for days now. The boy sat quietly like the others, but he missed nothing. He was watching Senwut now. Senwut returned his cup to the serving table and walked over to the boy. "My name is Senwut. I am the son of Yuf, master sculptor. I am Menk, only son of Issa, keeper of royal cattle." "Why is it, Menk, that the guards sent you here?" "I fell asleep while tending my herd, and a stray damaged the dike at Luxor." Menk looked Senwut straight in the eye, daring him to show disgust, but Senwut just nodded. Senwut waited for Menk to ask about his crime, but Menk sat in silence. "How is it you are not suffering like the rest of us?" Menk shrugged. "I have traveled through the desert before, with the cattle. There are tricks." A black beetle scuttled across the sand by Menk's feet. He snatched the scarab and popped it into his mouth. "They are crunchy, and not so tasty, but—" Senwut had seen hundreds of scarabs scurry out of his feet. A month ago, the idea of eating an insect would have choked him, but now he'd eat anything to curb the pain that tortured his stomach. Maybe he could gain back some of his strength, he thought. Maybe he would survive the trip to Nubia. But then he'd worry about that when they got there. If he could learn from Menk to survive in the desert, perhaps there would be someone to teach him to survive the mines. Tomorrow we pass Tharu, Menk said. I thought that place was just legend. I have been there. Is it true then? The villagers have no noses? Many criminals who have had their noses cut off move there. At least they can live in peace, without the stairs. They can begin again. Will there be sand dwellers? Senmut looked about him. He had heard tales of the bandits who would strip a caravan, not even leaving water. To take a desert traveler's water was an unforgivable crime. In the mines, those guilty of it were found beaten to death by the other prisoners. There are always sand dwellers, Menk shrugged. He didn't seem afraid of anything. Senmut swallowed. I can't sleep at night for fear of the jackals. They haunt my dreams. You must learn the roar. The roar? Menk tossed back his head and roared like a lion. It startled Senmut. It sounded so real. A few of the prisoners cried out, frightened of yet another danger. The guards laughed. That's amazing. I'd have sworn it was a real lion if I weren't sitting next to you. Menk shrugged. It moves a stubborn cow and scares the jackals away. For a while, anyway. Senmut tried to roar. This time the prisoners laughed too. No, like this. Feel my throat. Menk roared again. Senmut felt Menk's throat. It vibrated. He tried it again. Much better, but deeper, from here. Menk pushed between Senmut's ribs. By sunset, Senmut sounded almost like a lion. He was not as good as Menk, but maybe good enough to fool the jackals. Shadows crept across the red land as the huge white ball that was Ray sank into orange haze. The wind echoed through the dunes, shifting sand in clouds of dust. Copying Menk, Senmut burrowed into the sand. The warm weight felt good on his tired muscles. Tomorrow, he thought, I begin to survive.